Then it just sat there on the central walkway for years. In 1932, two architects, Constantini and Piantonelli, altered the base of the monolith, giving it a touch of avant-garde architecture. To place it in its definitive spot, they hoisted it up to the vertical position by means of a lever system.
It was built in 1927 by architect Del De at the site where today sits the Stadio Olimpico. In 1937, another architect, Luigi Moretti, revisited the project and added 2 rings around the Cyprus Stadium. Although still in construction, the venue was already cut out to be a monument meant to bedazzle the whole world. Mussolini's regime chose it for Hitler's visit in 1938. The stadium was then decorated with 24 towers topped by imperial eagles. They were dismantled as soon as the event was over. Works at the stadium were then interrupted by World War II. They resumed in 1950 to bring off the ground the Stadio dei 100.000, the Stadium of 100,000.
It was called Stadio dei 100.000 because there was 100,000 spectators. It was really large. A lot of people were standing, and it was a place where the large events would take place.
In 2013. The new stadium sits at the same spot as the previous one because for Athletic Bilbao's ardent supporters, it was simply inconceivable to have it moved to the outskirts of the city. It was imperative that this institution, the ambassador of a territory and its people, stay in the city center. Spanish architect Cesar Azcarate was put in charge of designing the new venue.
People have been coming to this place for over 120 years. It's a tradition we couldn't change. Finding a way to get it out of the city was therefore out of the question. The club itself and its fans wouldn't have let that happen. As you can see, it fits in pretty well with the city, both in height and size. You know, soccer stadiums tend to be the bigged architectural monuments in cities in terms of size and bulk. So we had to reduce both its footprint, so it would occupy as little space as possible, and its height as much as possible, to keep it at the same level as the other buildings in the city.
And the most difficult part was demolishing the street between the new and the old stadiums. And of course, the old stadium stands, whose arch was the symbol of the old San Mamés.
The roof structure had to cover all the stands. However, to avoid restricting spectators' view, placing a load-bearing structure inside the stadium had to be ruled out. The weight of the roof was to be supported by a structure of girders and cables above the roof itself, held by 8 gigantic pillars on all 4 corners of the stadium. The concrete towers were up to 70 meters tall, and the main roof structure was suspended at between 45 and 55 meters from the ground. The entire roof structure made up a third of the size of the stadium. Pressed for time, the building company had a colossal task at hand. And then something unexpected came up, which didn't help. A month after construction started, the project was put on standby. That imposing roof was turned down by the Ministry of Cultural Heritage and Activities and the Administrative Court of Rome. The impact on the landscape of those 8 towers of over 50 meters was too strong. It was a severe blow for the builders. They had to start over from scratch.
Ci siamo trovati col foglio bianco, pertanto.
We had to go back to the drawing board 16 months before opening day. The problem was the height of the pillars. We needed to find a solution as low as possible. Everything had to be done all over again.
As if the initial challenge was not big enough, now architects and engineers had to work hand in hand to pull off this incredible feat. The roof had to be as low as possible and quick to build. Eventually, architect Massimo Maggiovici came up with the perfect solution: a bicycle wheel roof.
That's when I came up with this innovation that had never been applied to such a big stadium before. A bicycle wheel entirely independent of the rest of the building. It doesn't need to be supported by any big structures like those tall towers. In fact, it's all about the ring, which, by the way, can be quite low, because the very concept allows that. Now, 30 years later, I wonder where I plucked up the courage to suggest this solution that had never been tried before. I must confess that we didn't have enough expertise back then to ensure a perfect result. In fact, we relied on our own intuition. Anyway, as we all know, the boundaries of the art should always be pushed further.
The Tevere stand was kept and reinforced because it's the testimony of the old stadium. You can still make out the travertine walls and the fountains. Travertine was used as a symbol, so we kept it and simply extended the wooden upper bit. This way, the history of the stadium can be appreciated through its symbols. So even if it was completely built, some historical vestiges were preserved in the Tevere stand.
Jaime Manca is an architect who specializes in wooden stadiums. He's taking us to the bottom of the stand.
This is the Tevere stand, built in 1990 for the World Cup. Above this concrete pillar structure, we built a light laminated wood structure. It supports the inclined beams, which in their turn bear the load of the aluminum stands. All that allowed us to have an ultralight system. This material weighs 500 kilos per cubic meter, so it's much lighter than any other material. For the sake of comparison, concrete weighs 2,500 kilos per cubic meter. In steel, over 6,000 kilos. Thanks to its extreme lightness, this material is very easy to use. It makes for a very simple building mechanism that can be quickly put together. The blocks are dovetailed, a bit like a huge Lego system.
Laminated is made from wooden planks coated with melamine glue and compressed together. After 12 hours, you get what's known as a glulam beam. These wooden beams and aluminum stadium symbolize the very extension of the Tevere stand. However, doesn't wood pose a significant risk of catching fire and blazing up quickly?
Glulam timber can catch fire because it's made from wood, but it's a type of timber that burns very slowly. Its carbon layer is reduced by 0.6 of a millimeter per minute. This knowledge allows us to accurately define the time needed to evacuate the building, which is impossible with other materials. For instance, at 800 degrees Celsius, steel loses its mechanical characteristics and collapses. The fire brigade tend to authorize glulam timber buildings more easily than they do steel or concrete.
Resistant. Francesco Rossini is an agronomist specialized in sports turfs. He works for Viterbo University.
Each sport requires a turf with specific technical features to ensure perfect playing. A stadium turf, therefore, doesn't have the same characteristics as the green in a golf course, a polo field, or even a tennis court. The turf must meet the demands of each sport.
And to make sure the turf of Stadio Olimpico could withstand all this activity, Francesco carried out laboratory tests to find the best formula.
We focused on optimizing the turf of Stadio Olimpico, and we found solutions that enabled it to be used both for soccer and for rugby. And all this was thanks to our recent research.
Most stadiums have synthetic grass. In Rome, they choose natural grass capable of withstanding impacts, but also the Mediterranean weather. This tailor-made turf combines two species of grass, Bermuda grass and English ryegrass.
Questa consociazione studiata negli Stati Uniti, nelle regioni della
This combination of crops designed in Florida and California was adopted here to make pitches more resistant to our Mediterranean climate.
Conferire appunto resistenza all'usura. In effetti, se non avessimo questa tipologia,
if we didn't have this kind of turf, we wouldn't be able to host the 64 to 67 events that are held every year at this stadium on average.
Questa composizione ci garantisce.
This mix provides all the characteristics required in terms of torsion and ground hardness.
E di durezza del tappeto erboso. È assolutamente nei parametri UEFA.
It satisfies the UEFA criteria, and as you can see, the turf is extremely robust, but just about enough to ensure the safety of soccer and rugby players during matches.
Sia di rugby che di calcio. Con questo sistema solo naturale, quindi,
with this system exclusively composed of natural species, we achieve the same game quality and performances as with synthetic grass.
L'erba sintetica per dare resistenza all'usura e al gioco.
At the football cathedral in San Mamés, soccer is a religion that cuts across all generations and social classes. On match evenings, the whole neighborhood comes alive. Fans march up the main road in procession towards the stadium and invade the Esplanade. For the builders, it was imperative to preserve this very special ardor, famous all over the world. In Rome, the two local clubs can also count on their fans to make the arena vibrate and their chanting heard all the way up to the Vatican. Rome's Stadio Olimpico and Bilbao's San Mamés both took a mad gamble and won. They reinvented themselves in record time by applying breakthrough technologies. They've both become real institutions whose renown goes way beyond borders and attracts spectators from all over the world.